Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name's Matt and today I'm going to be showing you how to make this awesome concrete countertop sink with this gold leaf base. So keep watching and I'll show you guys how to make it. So this project took actually about 4 attempts to make because I didn't get the concrete mixture right the first few times, and you can see at the start of the video that it's the summer and then it becomes the winter towards the end of the video. Basically what you want to do is choose a sink that you would like to copy, and then we're going to make a mold copy from that sink. So any lumps and bumps that you've got you want to smooth off and fill with car body filler, and then get the final finish up to 1200 grit. Then get some melamine board and cut the rectangular base section of the mold and make it about 50mm wider than the sink itself, and then cut some strips for the sides. Then you can use some mold release wax. So you can see this mirror gloss stuff that I'm using here, and just use it on the edges where you're just about to put the silicone to round off the edges. This will help to remove the excess that you can see there that's coming on either side of the drill bit. The next step is to measure up your sink and your mold and just glue down the sink in a central position, because this will stop it from moving when you're using the glass fibre a little bit later on. We're then going to use some trusty non-toxic plasticine to fill any unwanted gaps, and we're using it to fill the space between the sink and the mould surface here, and just pushing away any excess with a wooden stick. We're also using some 50mm sellotape. You can also use flash tape to cover up the plug hole at the top. Make sure it's nice and tight and flat. Then you want to apply up to 5 layers of the mirror gloss mould release wax. I didn't apply enough layers the first time round, so I had to damage the sink to get it out, but because it's a new mould you want to have at least 5 layers on there. Then using some plasticine, measure out some balls of plasticine and create some triangular pyramids as location pins for when you lock the two molds together. You can see them here. I'm then using the Easy Composites Unimold mold making kit in the regular size because it's plenty big enough for the project that I'm doing in this video, and it's got all of the materials needed for making a glass fibre mold of this sort. And you can find a link in the description for that product along with any other product and tools used in this video. So first you can see that I've applied a single thick layer of black tooling gel coat and then lightly gone over it with a blowtorch to try and get rid of any bubbles that might exist in the surface. I've then gone on to prepare the 100g glass fibre matting so that it's ready for when I start applying the coupling coats. It's a thinner glass fibre mat because it doesn't print through onto the surface as easily as the thick glass fibre matting, so the surface will come out nice and smooth once it's all done. While that's curing to a tacky state, I'm now cutting up the 400g backing layers, which are going to provide most of the structural strength of the moulds. So we're doing 3 layers of that on the back. And you can see here that I'm just positioning the first layer of the thicker glass fibre backing just before I mix up the tooling resin, because you have a limited amount of working time. So I've just copied that for 3 layers and just go straight after the other and just allow it to cure and try and consolidate it as much as possible with the brush and a roller that you get with the kit. And once that's all cured, you can start to take it apart and just release the first side of the mould. It's actually quite satisfying when you chisel it away and see the smooth finish underneath. So now that it's open, you can see the hot glue gun splodges that are there. I'm just removing those with a chisel very carefully without scratching it, and also the plasticine pyramids. You can remove those with some acetone and a wooden stirring stick and a Stanley knife and just pick away at it and just clean the mould off with the rest of the acetone. Then cut some double height strips of melamine board so that they stick above the mould that you've just created, and glue them on with a hot glue gun. And this time I've used some plasticine instead of silicone to make the fillet around the edges, just for a bit more speed. Then simply follow the same process that you did for the first side and make sure that you apply those 5 layers of wax, especially in the location pyramids that we've created and the sink itself, because these are all brand new surfaces that need a good release on them. I did this all outside on a warm summer's day, but it's advisable to do this indoors in a well-ventilated area because you're much more in control of conditions. If you have any moisture in the air outside, then it can affect how well the resin will cure. But it was quite a nice dry day and I didn't get any contamination from dust or dirt falling inside of the mould, so I was quite happy to do it outside, and it also cured much faster. You can then remove the side pieces and mark out the positions for drilling the bolt holes for putting the bolts through that will hold the mould together when you're filling it with concrete. And I used some M10 bolts with some wing nuts from Toolstation that turned out pretty good. This is where I found out that I hadn't used enough layers of wax on those fresh surfaces because I ended up forcing the moulds open and damaging them slightly, but most of the mould came out really nice and smooth and I was pretty happy with it. Now we can see both sides of the mould. The organic shapes have come out really nice, but on the edges you have a little bit of damage. Now you can see along there, got a couple more. So just showing you now how I'm going to do a repair on these edges. What I've done is I've taped around areas that I want to repair, and I've taped some sellotape to the actual sink and then placed the sink back in, so that when I blob in the tooling gel coat, it won't go past this barrier and it won't spill excessively onto flat sections that I don't want it to get onto. Basically built up the layers of masking tape so that it matches the same height as the lip here. So you can see there's a thickness there of masking tape. Then you can see here that I'm just using a pointy wooden stirring stick and blobbing some tooling gel coat into those holes, and then just sanding the areas flat, and I'll work my way up to 1200 grit. You can then use a multi-tool or an angle grinder to cut the base of the mould out so that we have somewhere to pour the concrete in. And then we're going to sand the bottom of the mould flush with where we want the bottom of the sink to start. I then wet polished both sides of the moulds with 1200 grit wet and dry paper to match the same surface finish on the repair jobs that I did previously. And I also thought this wasn't a bad idea to have as the final surface finish of the sinks. So for the first attempt I used standard cooking oil as the mould release, as I have done on many other projects on my channel. And if you'd like to see those projects, then please do consider subscribing. I then sealed up the mould and mixed up a pre-mixed bag of high strength 40 Newton concrete, and then moved the mould around as I poured it in to get to all the nooks and crannies in the corners, and then used an oscillating multi-tool to vibrate the mould. So this has now been curing for 24 hours and we're going to demould it. First go didn't go particularly well. It broke as I was taking it out of the mould, but the top surface is really smooth, which is a good sign. So I'm giving this a second go now with some floor leveling compound that's got glass fibre in it. So basically floor leveling compound is concrete, sharp sand, some polymers to give it a good flowability, and also it's got glass fibre in it to make it strong. So we'll give that a go and see if it comes out a bit easier. I'm also going to put masking tape around the basin hole. Here I thought that the basin hole was probably the reason why the last concrete sink broke, because concrete shrinks as it cures, and I thought that by making it slightly larger it wouldn't grip onto it as much as I took it out. I also thought that the glass fibres in this new mix of concrete would make it slightly stronger, but I ended up finding out that it doesn't have those large pieces of aggregate in there, which also affects the strength of the concrete. We also made a makeshift vibrating table, which I can show you in another video that I've got on how to make a vibrating table, so just click on the link on the description for that video. This looks on that edge. After opening the mould up and examining the pieces, you can see there's quite a lot of dust on there, and I started to think the mould release wasn't working properly, so I used a pressure washer to try and separate the two, and I ended up breaking the sink again because it gripped on so tightly when I was taking it out. For the third attempt, I used the same Miracle Gloss mould release wax that I used when I was making the mould in the first place, and I applied 5 layers to try and get as much release as possible. I then used the same concrete mix, and this time I used the vibrating tables to try and get as many air bubbles out as possible. I also waited 3 days instead of 24 hours to try and give the concrete a little bit more of a chance to get stronger before taking it out of the mould. After a fair amount of frustration, I managed to get the sink out of the mould and only broke a small piece off this time, so I figured that the mould release is working and the 3-day cure was much better for it. But for this final attempt, I ended up using a belt and braces approach, which I should have done from the start, and I polished the mould surface up from a 1200 grit finish to a high gloss finish using a machine polisher and some 3M fast cut polishing compound. I also used 5 layers of wax as mould release, 0.5% mortar plasticizer to keep the concrete as workable as possible as I vibrated it, 5% acrylic bonding agent, which is a UV stable concrete strengthener, and also 3% alkali resistant glass fibres, and the original high strength 40 Newton concrete that I used in the first attempt. You can see all the measurements on the screen for how to do this for yourself, and all the links for the products in the description that I've used in this video. After 3 days of curing it, it opened up first time with the side that I could never get off first, super easily.
Oh, perfecto.
Then it was just a case of removing some of the excess material because I overfilled it slightly this time, which made it slightly more difficult to get it out on the normally easier side. And it works. Using a machine polisher and a 50 grit sanding pad, I then removed all the flashing from the edges. I then allowed it to dry overnight, and using car body filler and the same concrete pigment, I filled the underside and sanded it smooth. I then taped off the underside of the sink and applied gliding paste with a paintbrush and allowed it to tack off for 15 minutes. Once tacky, then I applied gold imitation leaf to the base of the sink, and then I used a dry brush to brush it smooth. The same process can also be used with real 24 karat gold leaf. I then used 5 layers of a high quality food safe concrete countertop sealer and then 2 layers of a compatible concrete countertop wax. I like to use both these products because they provide the most natural look to the concrete and don't give it a wet look. You can find links to both of these products in the description below. After 15 minutes or so, the wax will have dried, and then you can polish it off with a microfiber cloth. You can then watch water bead up on the surface.
Oh, perfecto!
Despite this project taking 4 attempts to get it right, I think it turned out really well. And if you found it useful, please do give it a thumbs up, and please do consider subscribing to the channel because I've got plenty more concrete content coming for you in the future. If you've got any questions on things that you think I might have missed out, then please do write them in the comments below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys soon.